You know, being an author is a lot like being a mom. You spend nearly a year creating this little bundle of joy, and possibly way longer on the back end. And all you can do is pray that it turns into something worthwhile. But without proper care, discipline, and feedback, it'll turn into absolute and sometimes it still does. And because you're so in love with your little creation, you can't see all of its god-awful faults. And when his first grade teacher comes up to you and says, your adverbs are a mess, your plot wanders, and your son just shit in the terrarium, you get defensive. And instead of taking valuable feedback, you start making excuses. Because like any other enabling boy mom, you refuse to admit your precious boy is actually a tiny monster.
Oh, why not my son? He's the deacon boy at our local church. He loves Jesus and animals, and his hook is really good. He has a very marketable premise, and he's incredibly original.
And here's the honest truth. It takes a village to raise a child, and it also takes a village to write a good book. Beta readers, editors, friends who aren't afraid to hurt your feelings, and worst of all, agents. And if you don't listen to him, your little monster ends up causing a lot of trouble. And the next thing you know, he's starring in Jubilee debates and Jordan Peterson compilations, or worst of all, right here on Orbiting the Shelf. Hi, and welcome back to Orbiting the Shelf. As always, I'm Matt, you're the audience. Thank you so much for clicking on another one of my trash videos. And today I am talking about Audra Winter's The Age of Scorpius and The World of Guardian. Hi, future Matt here. Today she just announced she's giving herself 4 months to fix all of the grammar stuff in the book, do a few small rewrites, and she opened pre-orders for the second edition of the book. And what's even more shameless, it's more expensive than the last one. I was joking about the battle pass, and I was kind of joking about how this is monetized out the ass. That is the most shameless shit I've ever seen in my life. I don't think Jeff Bezos himself could have come up with a more diabolical plan to monetize every aspect of a singular YA book. This is the type of greed they talk about in the Bible.
Brother, may I have some oats?
No.
I am starving, brother.
As am I, brother. The tall, skinny figure has thrown the oats at me. Me, brother. I believe they have taken a liking to me.
No, brother.
Now, if you're uninitiated on BookTok, the chances you haven't heard of this are pretty darn high. A lot of BookTok drama doesn't make its way to YouTube, but unfortunately for you and me both, I am chronically online. And before we get started, this video is not meant to harass or be mean to Audra Winters or roast her. Okay, maybe roast a little bit, but like in good taste, alright? Because at the end of the day, Audra Winters is going through the same thing every author on the face of the planet does, unless you're a child prodigy, but we'll get into that later. The life cycle of an author is to write your first book, and it's shit, and you write your second book, and it's shit, and you write your third book, and maybe it's a little less shit, and you do this over and over until you finally put out your first book. And no matter how hard you work, no matter how skilled you are, your first book is probably shit. And even if it's good, it's gonna be shit compared to the titles you put out later because inevitably you grow as an author. And just like those cringy memories from middle school, it'll come back to haunt you late at night. Except what's worse is that there's a Goodreads page dedicated to it, and maybe promotional content and marketing. So you can never really forget the blunder that is your first book. But the one reprieve you have is that nobody read your first book. And so, in a sense, it is forgettable, and no one will really hold it against you, because only your hardcore fans will go back and read that original work, and more than likely, they'll be nice about it. But that's not the case for Audra Winters. Audra Winters had the fortune and misfortune of having a massive audience, having a huge marketing campaign that actually worked, unlike most authors, and she had all the eyes in the world on her very first release. And frankly, that's a curse I wouldn't wish upon anybody. And I know as authors, indie authors, self-published authors, a lot of us are probably jealous of that success. And I would say, don't be. Because could you imagine if everyone in the world remembered the very first thing you ever wrote, let alone the very first thing you published?
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Personally, I don't think that's worth $100,000 in pre-order sales. But all of this is to say, don't harass Audra Winters. don't go review bomb her Goodreads if you haven't read the book. And hopefully one day she can look back on all these videos as a successful author and go, wow, what a crazy time in my life. All right, so The Age of Scorpius was a novel being promoted online, and it was promoted as a YA fantasy novel set in the modern era, but based around the zodiac signs. To me, it kind of sounded like Divergent, but for like Pisces and Scorpius and Cancer, and it was marketed heavily as a genre-shattering political revolution. Aesthetic, vibey collages, neurodivergent representation, and a strange amount of like Ragebait marketing. I can't tell you how many ads I saw for this book that was like, I wrote this book to piss off Republicans. I wrote this book to start a revolution of neurodivergent queer authors, and we're gonna take over the world and make conservatives piss their pants. Which, I get the current political climate is very upsetting, but marketing your book as a way to like rage bait Republicans probably isn't like the smartest idea, because if you're gonna have political themes in your book, they should probably be like subtle and meaningful, because fiction, when used as a methodology to change belief, should do so in a way that doesn't come across as like overtly preachy, because then the target audience you're trying to change the belief of isn't gonna read it, they're not gonna appreciate it, and they're gonna like immediately push it away. And then you're sabotaging the core reader base who does believe with you, because it's not coming across as fiction or fantasy, it's coming across as like a crash out rant. And even if you agree with the person, that's not really why you're reading books. So you're managing to alienate both audiences, and the only people who are gonna appreciate that is like the hardcore leftists who like are also crashing out and being really crazy online. And like, let's be honest, you're not gonna rage bait Republicans or like be featured on Fox News as like a controversial author, because Republicans are too busy banning the Hungry Caterpillar and like the colorful fish book. Republicans are still struggling to pull Green Eggs and Ham off the AR reading cart. So I get that it's gonna, like, marketing wise, that's gonna get you a lot of views, it's gonna garner a lot of interest, it's gonna stir up a lot of conversation in the comics, but ultimately I think that's like a huge fail. If your book has something political to say, it should probably be subtle and implemented in a way that effectively changes the mind of the people who it's supposed to like represent. There's an Aristotle quote about that somewhere. Maybe I'll put it here, I don't know. And if it wasn't political, every promotional video looked like a Pinterest board, like someone had typed in Dark Academia Zodiac Revolution into Canva at 3 a.m. So the whole book was sort of based off of like vibes, political revolution, but like not in a meaningful way. And then the third pillar of her marketing strategy was, I've been working on this book for 10 years of my life.
Because I have been in the publishing industry for 10 years and written 10 books. So no, The Age of Scorpius is not my first book, and I have made that so clear so many times on this platform.
And 10 years is a long time. If someone like George Martin or Brandon Sanderson had said, I've been working on this book for 10 years of my life, that would be impressive. But when a 20-year-old says, I've been working on this for 10 years of my life, do you know what that means? That means they've been working on this since they were 10 years old. And you are setting yourself up for failure so badly in this situation, because you're signaling to the audience that you're either a liar or a prodigy. And so you have to really sell the shit out of this book, because 10 years ago you were 10 years old. You were still begging your mom to buy you Danimals and grips at the store. You weren't James Cameron inventing gyroscopic underwater 8K cameras so that you could bring your vision that you've had since you were 30 to life. You were still learning how to put your fingers on the QWERTY row on your keyboard in 3rd grade. Personally, the only thing I was worried about in 3rd grade was if my mom packed me Cheez-Its in my lunch, and if I could get to the pirate bin full of pirate toys before everybody else. So you've effectively told everybody that you've been working on this since you were 10, and that signals, right? You might not have said it, but that signals to people that you're marketing yourself as a prodigy, which is a bold strategy, and if the Goodreads reviews are to be trusted, it probably wasn't true. And that's fine. Most people aren't prodigies. And I'm somewhat of like an indie book, self-published book expert, because I get like so many people sending me their self-published works and their indie works to promote on the channel. So I get to read a lot of dog shit first books. And that's part of the process. No shame there. And is this the worst indie book I've ever seen? No. Is it the worst self-published book I've ever seen? No, definitely not. I mean, I've read books from like indie presses, from like actual indie publishers that are way worse. I read one that was written in like the second person and the character didn't have a name. They referred to him as the man, and the pacing was awful and the prose was awful. I've read a lot of horrible books. It's not like the worst one I've ever read. So I think it's safe to say the Prodigy gamble didn't pay off that well. Just be careful when you're using that sort of angle to market yourself, because the backlash is gonna be crazy. Also, part of the marketing, the sort of like the fourth invisible pillar of this marketing strategy, was constantly flexing how many employees she has.
I have a team from across the world, like 12 different countries, asking me to be on my team. I will be opening auditions for that on Tuesday. We are a team made up of about 15 or 16, I'd have to double check the exact number now, of artists and animators. So I now have animators working on the project as well.
Not like freelance employees either, but like she was the CEO of like Scorpius Incorporated. And part of that pillar of the marketing strategy was like, my employees are absolutely obsessed with this book. At one point she literally said, when I'm not looking, my employees aren't hanging out on their phones. They're drawing comic strips of my book. When I'm not looking, they stop working. Like any other boss at any other company. They're not scrolling Reddit. They're making fan fiction of the Scorpius cinematic universe. And we saw that everywhere. My team, my employees. And I wasn't following this super closely, but in the huge Reddit thread that's like roasting her right now, people are saying that she contacted the Guinness Book of World Records because she like shattered pre-order sales, and that she was like the first indie author to like sell X amount of books. Also part of that marketing strategy was talking about how she had made like 100,000, 120,000 in pre-order sales, and how this was the most groundbreaking book from an indie author ever. PR 101, right? Don't brag about your success to your audience. Don't wiggle your prize in the audience's face and go, look what you gave me. Look how much money I'm making off of you. My product must be so good if you're giving me all of your money. I just can't help how much money I'm making off of all you plebes pre-ordering my book. No refunds, by the way. True story. Granted, like, I don't know, you pre-ordered an indie author book, like, you deserve to not get a refund. It was $20. Don't buy Taco Bell this week. It had the same energy as, like, one of those silly narcissistic LinkedIn posts you see from, like, people really deep in the rat race. So proud of my employees for being contractually obligated to love my book. Hashtag girl boss. Hashtag Scorpius Squad. I wrote that down last night in the shower because I thought it was super funny. I'm a genius. I've been working on this joke for 10 years of my life. I was in the same third grade class as Audra Winters, and I was a day one hater. No, I'm just kidding. But I am a comedic prodigy who sold over $100,000 worth of jokes. Alright, section 2, talking about the biggest sin, the editing. If you know anything about anything when it comes to writing, you know that the first draft of your book is awful. It doesn't matter if you're George Martin or Brandon Sanderson or Hank Green. Does Hank Green write the books, or is it the other Green? It doesn't matter. If you're Green, you still don't publish your first draft. In fact, Hank Green or whatever other Green writes the books literally has a famous quote where he says after he's done writing his book, he goes back and edits and loses 90% of the book. This is pretty standard practice. Even my small novel I'm trying to get published right now ended at 70,000 words, and after editing, I cut it down to like 60. It's very normal to cut huge portions of your books, and it was 60 after rewrites. And that ties back in to how you can't love your work too much as an author. I promise you, not every piece of purple prose, not every piece of over-explaining, not every piece of exposition matters. You have to cut it. And then after you cut it, you have to edit it. So the process should look something like this. You write your first draft. You finish it. You don't publish it. You don't send it to agents. You do not show it to anybody. Don't do it. Don't show it to anybody, all right? Keep it to yourself like an ashamed artist. Then you spend like 2 or 3 weeks going through every single chapter and painstakingly reading every line out loud to yourself so you can hear the cadence, you can hear if it's clunky, and you can kind of clear the mental lens in your head that filters your work to make sure it's good. And you fix sentence structure, you fix adverbs, you fix exposition, you fix grammar. And 3 weeks later, then and only only then will you send it to your harshest friend or your harshest beta reader, someone who is truly willing to just tear you apart. Better yet, send it to your worst f***ing hater. And then once you get their feedback, you implement it. And then and only then will you send it to a mass of beta readers or a mass of friends and family. Then once you get all of their feedback, you can take that, internalize it, see what you like and don't like, and make those changes. And then you do another pass where you go through and read your book to yourself again. And then and only then will you send it to agents. And then you'll send it to 30 agents, 40 agents, depending on how many are available in your genre. There's not a lot in horror, so I had to be careful. I wasn't, by the way. And then you're going to get feedback from the first batch of 20 or 30 agents. You implement it, you fix your draft, you send it to another batch of 20 or 30 agents, and you do that process over and over and over again until you find somebody who loves your book as much as you do. And by that point in time, your book is almost kind of publishable. Then they send it to an editor, and your editor is your friendliest hater you've ever met. And they'll tear your book apart, tell you everything that sucks, what's marketable, what's not, what audiences will like, and then you do your final round of edits. And then and only then is it publish ready. The only people who put out that level of unpolished work are people who put forth their first or second draft. Audra claimed she had 2 editors, one of which had worked on the Hunger Games, and the other, I don't know. That seemed like bullshit right away to me, alright? Because you can send your book to somebody like me, a complete amateur with 200 YouTube subscribers and a couple of failed books, and even I will catch missing periods, run-on sentences, exposition dumps. So this seemed either like 1, a bold-faced lie to save face, or 2, you had the 2 most incompetent editors to ever grace the face of the earth. You could have sent this to a monkey with a bachelor's degree, and they would have caught most of the mistakes here. And I know what you guys are going to say, right? As indie-published authors or self-published authors, we don't have the resources to hire an editor. And I feel you, I didn't either. I edited my book myself 4 different times, sent it to beta readers, edit it myself again. Brutal process, alright? I had to take like a hero dose of mushrooms to have ego death to be able to edit my own book, and it's still shit. But that's not the case here, right? And we know it's not the case here because she has bragged openly about her massive team of artists from all around the world. She has a Patreon set up with quite a few members. She brags about how many employees she has, how much money she's made off of pre-orders. There was more than enough money to hire even the most dog editor off of, like, I don't know, one of those websites where you find hookers and cheap labor and people to 3D print cup holders for you. Fiverr, or I don't know, one of those other sites maybe. Craigslist even. Hire a Craigslist editor. The point is, there was way more than enough money, and the lack of humility and the overabundance of arrogance proves that. I don't care if you have to sell your cat or your leg or one of your kidneys, hire an editor. Unless you have like a master's degree in English, you know, or you're like really used to writing in research papers for like actual research. That's my background. That's the only reason I felt even remotely comfortable enough to edit my own book, and I still think I did horrible. Anyways, in what world do you have money to hire like 1 or 2 artists from every single continent in the world, but not enough for an editor? And there were so many red flags surrounding this book already. As we saw with Luke Bateman, if you're famous enough, if you have enough hype behind you, they don't even require the book. As long as there is an audience and the capability of writing a book, they will publish anybody. The fact that either the author was so arrogant they weren't willing to take feedback from an agent or an editor, so they cut them off because she stated she had an agent and pursued being traditionally published, but fired them? Whatever. And then the fact that they self-published despite having all of this hype and all of these pre-orders speaks volumes about the red flags that must have been going on either in negotiations or editing or somewhere in the representation pipeline. So she moved forward with the book, and readers had huge issues with the substance. Reviews were immediately terrible. The book was super awful, and she really only had like a handful or 2 of like really devout followers who still hyped her up. Shame on you guys, by the way. You're not good friends. You're not good friends for hyping up somebody who has inexplicably failed in everything leading up to this phase. A good friend would have told this author that the book was bad and changes needed to be made and release dates needed to be pushed back. So everybody had pre-ordered these books without review copies, without arcs, without samples. They blindly pre-ordered. And most of the people who blindly pre-ordered went and left 4 or 5-star reviews because they really trusted Audra, and from the marketing, it sounded like a slam dunk. So they received their books, hated them, nobody liked it, and they kept reviews locked. So they locked the reviews, trapped the good faith reviewers into their 4 and 5 stars so that on like Amazon and TikTok shop, the book looked like a smash hit with like a 4.5 star average. And they kept them locked until like a month after launch. So nobody was able to know that this book was so bad. That is the most bad faith, corrupt I've ever f***ing heard. That is so wrong on so many levels, it's comical. That's like mustache and monocle levels of evil. Like you have your audience tied to train tracks and the Goodreads train is just making their way for them, but nobody comes to save them until a month after the book is done releasing. That's not a marketing strategy. That's just entrapment with glitter. All right, section 3, the author's response to all this. As I kind of mentioned at the beginning, Audra Winter like crashed out pretty bad initially, and that's to be expected a little bit. As a young person, especially someone below the age of 30, you're gonna have a hard time controlling your emotions and your reactions to things, especially when it comes to something you love so much getting shit on like your first book. I remember when my wife read the first thing I ever wrote and told me it was awful, and I was like, oh, how dare you? Square up. Let's do this. No, I'm joking. I would never hit my wife. My wife does hit me though. Just kidding. I have hit my wife a few times, but that's because we do MMA together. She's tough. She can take it. She's a blue belt. Anyways, one of the biggest things. So the first reviews came in, her comments were getting flooded, and her immediate go-to, her first go-to was "you're too dumb to get it." And that's hilarious because if you've been in the space for a while, unless you're the snobbiest snob, you understand that a good book can convey information to pretty much anybody who's capable of reading. In fact, I have a friend, I'll say, who doesn't read at all, dropped out of like 8th grade, a little bit dumb, right? Love him to death. And I have him beta read everything I do. And if my ideas can't come across to that person, then I'm failing. Outside of like passages with flowery prose or bigger adjectives, if that person doesn't get the gist of my book, doesn't kind of understand the themes, I know I'm failing. A 5th grader should be able to read your book and kind of get what's going on. So the like, "you're too dumb" defense simply doesn't work. It's bad faith. It's incredibly rude, and you're actively working to destroy your current audience and your future audience. Your bad faith rudeness is going to sabotage you in the future. Those people will never come back. That's why I say if you're not a pop star or an athlete, you don't have fans. You have a community. You have friends. You have people who choose to show up for you and choose to give you their money. All right, if you're not a pop star or an athlete, you're a beggar on the street corner shaking your tin cup for pennies. That's what I always tell other authors. That's what I always tell other people looking to get into BookTube. You do not have fans. These people will not show up for you no matter what. You have to earn their trust, earn their respect, earn their admiration, earn their love. You have no right, you have no entitlement to these people. So telling them they're too dumb to get your book is literally the worst thing in the world you can do. All right, and then after tempers had cooled off, the second defense was you wouldn't get this unless you're neurodivergent. And I'm not going to shy away from this because I'm neurodivergent, have been my whole life, and I raw dogged that shit without medication forever. I'm still not doing it, all right? I've just learned to adapt. A lot of modern authors try to hide behind the shield of diversity. So if they write a bad book, if they write bad characters, if their book fails to connect with an audience, they'll often go, "Oh, you're racist. Oh, you're ableist. Oh, you're sexist." And those things are true a fair amount of times, but the reading space is inherently very leftist, so it doesn't hold as true as it does in like video games or movies or board games or what have you. More often than not, and Audra Winter's used this extensively, she told her audience, "You wouldn't get it because you're not a lesbian and you're not neurodivergent." And as an autist who openly dated in the army, I would like to say that is not the case. The characters just sucked. They fell flat, and that's fine. You're not going to understand the craft of characters and arcs and subtlety in your first book or your second or maybe even your third. The character craft and telling a miniature story within the story is hard. I promise you, people who aren't neurodivergent and who aren't lesbians can still relate to neurodivergent and queer characters. Do you remember Bill from The Last of Us? My straight friends cried during that episode. So I hate that defense. It's bad faith, and you're making your community look bad by doing so because they're associated with your antics now. You can't call this bad. There's a bisexual character. That's not representation. That's a hostage situation. One of the things that was funniest to me is that Audra clearly runs her own social media. This has been clear since day one. I've been seeing ads for this book for like a year or so. Was never up my alley, so I never paid attention to it. At some point recently, she started switching to like third person HR speak. So every time she addressed the audience, it sounded like the HR manager at Doo-Doo Dynamics sending out an email to the team. And she started referring to herself as like we and our, like Scorpius Enterprises has like a 401k plan and really good health insurance and a sprawling team of dynamic professionals who enjoy a fast-paced and dynamic, ever-changing environment. Like, girl, we know you run your own socials, okay? Let's stop referring to yourself as the team and we and our. Another thing, she was like going through and actively deleting like all of the reviews and comments that she didn't like, which I don't know. You could debate either way on that. Personally, I think you're entitled to your space. If you don't want to like be one person reading hundreds of hate comments, I get it, all right? I'm like universally hated on fly fishing Instagram, and I have a reel with like 1 million views and like thousands of comments calling me a piece of shit for catching fish the wrong way. Legally, by the way. So I get it. Having an overwhelming amount of hate sent your way is like one of the worst things in the world, especially because your like human monkey brain is just screaming at you like, we're getting kicked out of the clan. We can't be a lone wolf. We evolved nomadically. And so all the alarm bells go off in your brain and it makes you feel like, so go ahead, delete comments, make it a safe space for yourself, whatever. I don't disagree on that. But what I do disagree on when it comes to your comment section is posting edits in your comments. Like, hey, I'm revising the book. Here's a page of my edits. And it's like marked up with like crayon and pen. That is such a rookie mistake. Remember when I said no one on earth should see your first draft? No one on earth should see your edits. You're giving your audience the ick, all right? It's like being on the first date and then telling the girl across from you at Applebee's how much you love Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro, or how your favorite YouTube video of all time is a feminist gets owned compilation. You're giving the audience the ick, okay? Stop. You want to be seen as a professional, and what you're doing is demystifying the process and taking the magic out of writing books. Please, God, the audience doesn't want to know about your edits. That reeks of like damage control, putting out fires, saving face, and also you're doing the work after you sold everybody the product. All right, topic number 4, the live service universe. And no, I'm not joking. The Age of Scorpius, the World of Guardian, was literally intended to have a live service, expanded universe. Did you stick around for the Age of Scorpius post-credit scene?
What if I told you we were putting a team together? Who's we?
The post-credit paragraph. The next book is supposed to include cancer. Just kidding. As a cancer man, though, please stop hating on us. I promise we're fine. But honestly, maybe she's just even more of a marketing genius than I thought. Maybe we're getting like a fantasy MCU, right? Maybe this is season 1 of Age of Scorpius, and she's just gonna sell us the Age of Scorpius Battle Pass. And tier 1, you get basic punctuation. That clip aged like shit. Hi, future Matt here. Today she just announced she's giving herself 4 months to fix all of the grammar stuff in the book, do a few small rewrites, and she opened pre-orders for the 2nd edition of the book. And what's even more shameless, it's more expensive than the last one. I was joking about the battle pass, and I was kind of joking about how this is monetized out the ass. That is the most shameless shit I've ever seen in my fucking life. Log enough hours into Age of Scorpius and you get fewer exposition dumps on your next reread. And if you make tier 10, You log 1,000 hours into the Age of Scorpius battle pass, you unlock the editor. That's when he comes out and makes it like a readable book. And one of the jobs of her team of artists from like every continent in the world was to make like live service content drops between wait times for books. So you were gonna get like art and comic panels and a bunch of other stuff if you subscribe to the Patreon to hold you over. Kind of like MMOs dropping like between season content trickles, like MMO mini events for $19.99 a month. And that's kind of like one of my final thoughts is this book was monetized out the ass. It was so unashamedly monetized. I don't think Jeff Bezos himself could have come up with a more diabolical plan to monetize every aspect of a singular YA book. This is the type of greed they talk about in the Bible.
Brother, may I have some oats?
No.
I am starving, brother.
As am I, brother. The tall, skinny figure has thrown the oats at me. Me, brother. I believe they have taken a liking to me.
No, brother.
There's going to be a Sociology 101 class on late-stage capitalism based around monetizing a book this hardcore. The most diabolical monetization schemes in history. There's going to be Blizzard Entertainment and Audra Winters. All right, fifth and final topic, Goodreads. When I had originally wrote the script for Age of Scorpius, the Goodreads reviews were at like 2.4, which is diabolical because, like my wife, most reviewers, if they don't hate the book, will give you 4 or 5 stars. Super disingenuous. I hate it. It hypes up books that don't deserve to be hyped up, which is really saying something because looking at it, as of today, as of recording, Age of Scorpius is at 1.71 stars, which if she wants to contact the Guinness Book of World Records again, this might be the lowest rated book I've ever seen on Goodreads. It's certainly the lowest rated book on Goodreads that's made the most money ever, but let's see what the reviewers have to say about this. Shocking amount of 5-star reviews, by the way. Steven said, "This book is insanely good, especially for her debut novel. Becky's the only..." Okay, look, I'm about to read this review from Becky. Becky is the only person in the world telling the truth about this book. Becky is the only 5-star reviewer to be trusted. If Rebecca Yaros wrote it, then this would get a 5. So here is a 5, TikTok. Oh, I promise I didn't mean to have 2 videos in a row where Rebecca Yaros catches a stray. But Becky is so real for that because if TikTok had hyped this book up, everyone would have loved it. Psyops are so real. Propaganda is so real. Consumerist propaganda especially. If your top 5 most famous book talkers had said this was amazing, everyone would have loved this and I would have been one of the haters like, what the fuck is going on? Honestly, Becky has really bad taste, but I respect the fuck out of that honesty. Becky was like, I read trash, I love trash. If this had been Rebecca Yaros, I'd have loved it. Talk about an egoless person. God, I admire Becky. All of the other 5-star reviews are literally wordless. I have a feeling they were probably some of the pre-order people who had just like given it 5 stars, or you know, they're part of the staff. They're a part of the staff that can't help but talk about the book and draw about the book on their free time behind Audra's back as the boss. And the 1-star reviews clearly have the most. Oh man, there's so many harsh reviews. Zara said, would have been a DNF, but I made myself finish it because I wanted to give it an honest shot. To say it was poorly written, poorly developed, and poorly edited would be an understatement. She has even misspelled her own made-up words. That is, oh, that gives me a stomach ache, bro. Oh no. The characters are especially irksome, all flat and flawless, with the exception of Avia, who is obnoxious but not nearly as bad as the other characters made her out to be. Kaya comes off like a bully and a busybody for getting involved in a Avia and Rika's sister relationship, though the narrative paints her as righteous and noble. None of them are likable, and for all the authors talk about emotions, nothing these characters feel comes across as earned in any way. This is why when someone tells you your book isn't ready, you don't just dismiss it, because it's not something you want to hear. It's a shame because the concept has potential, but it needed so much more time. 10 years of writing means nothing when you were barely a developed individual for most of it. Books that were written by teenagers read like they were written by teenagers, and in this case, The Age of Scorpius reads like it was written by a 12-year-old. 10 rewrites or 25. This author's writing never developed beyond the skill of a child. I'm baffled. While While I commend her passion for the project, her success in popularizing the book, as well as building a fan base before even publishing a single word, is her only impressive feat. Perhaps she should consider a career shift to literary marketing. That's actually great advice. I'm sure Audra Winters would be a great fit at like a publishing agency or as a literary agent. All of the reviews are really harsh and really mean. I meant to do a whole section just reading reviews, but I don't want to get that negative. All right. Closing thoughts. If you're an indie author, marketing your book is super important, and that's where most people fail. Social media is hard, and writing a book is harder, and being a master of those two very hard things at once is nearly impossible. Most indie authors will write a good book and then fail in the marketing and give up, and this is a cautionary tale of 1, be careful with how you market your book, and 2, don't get in your own way. I don't know how many indie authors I've talked to who chose to be indie authors or self-published authors because they simply couldn't take the criticism and the blow to their ego when it came to listening to beta readers, listening to agents, listening to publishers, and they were convinced they were right and everybody else was wrong. You take anything away from this video, listen to your haters within reason, right? Listen to feedback, listen to beta readers. For the love of God, don't get so wrapped up in your own hype and your own ego that you refuse to edit your book, you refuse to make changes and rewrites. I promise you, taking feedback from others on your book is the most helpful thing in the world you can ever do. Make those harsh edits, make those hard changes, please. And then once it's all said and done, then get out there and market your book, or then get out there and query agents. Don't be too in love with your own work. So please, please listen to the people around you when they tell you your book needs work. The most prolific authors in history edit their books and make sweeping changes for a reason. If Hank Green, or whatever Green writes the books, cuts 90% of his books, it's okay to cut 90% of yours. So what did we learn from this? If you're gonna market your book as a cultural revolution, at least make sure it's readable. Otherwise, you're just selling people a really expensive Pinterest board. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. As always, I've been Matt, you've been great, and I'll see you next time. Don't be mean. Don't be mean to Audra Winter. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much. Sorry my lights are reflecting in my glasses. Bye.